Ted Turner is like Dracula. You have to drive a stake through his heart to stop him. And though many have come close, he's back. Though he's gone from being a really rich man to a mere billionaire, he's maintained the manic energy that drove him to change the landscape of the information age by creating CNN and 24-hour news. The uncompromising competitor who won the America's Cup, the ex-husband of Jane Fonda, the batty billionaire who challenged his arch-enemy, fellow billionaire Rupert Murdoch, to a boxing match. Once described as both genius and jackass, he's now decided to reflect on a tumultuous life and more or less tell all in a memoir. Ted Turner is the largest individual landowner in the United States, owning 2 million acres across 12 states. We caught up with him at one of his Montana ranches, this lonesome cowboy who hates his own company. You hate being alone.
I don't like being alone. These are big places to be alone. I tell you, come out here and spend the night by yourself sometime. You know, the coyotes out there howling, oh! It's pretty scary.
Out here at the Snowcrest Ranch, Ted Turner is not alone. He keeps company with bison, horses, and a stream full of Ruby River trout.
Oh, Mamma Mia! That's a real nice fish.
Life is good for Ted Turner. He's not your average old-age pensioner. This most restless of men jets round the world.
Here we go.
Promoting good causes, dreaming up new business ventures, and dropping in on his dozens of properties scattered about the hemisphere. And now, as he turns 70, he's written his book. So after his morning ride, the man who proudly says he never looks back decided to do just that, to let Ted reflect on Ted.
I've had the good fortune to have a much more diverse life than most people, with professional sports and television and news and movies.
And a fairly spectacular private life, too.
Well, it's been a lot of fun.
Ted Turner burst on the scene in 1977 when he captained Courageous, the yacht that won the America's Cup. As a blotto Turner celebrated, Captain Outrageous emerged. But it was his groundbreaking creation of CNN that put Turner indelibly on the map. But his company's rapid growth and ballooning debt nearly bankrupted him.
I was going to go broke if I didn't get things turned around real fast. But I was able to get it refinanced without government help, I might add, unlike what's going on today. But we made it by the skin on our chinny chin chin. 2 years later, we made a run at CBS. Unsuccessful, but we did take a swing.
Instead, Turner went on to create his own broadcasting powerhouse, and when he merged his company with Time Warner in 1996, his status as media visionary was confirmed.
I didn't care how much adversity life threw at me. I intended to get to the top.
The adversity started at infancy, shipped off to boarding school at the age of 4, followed by years of military school for discipline. He says his alcoholic father did everything he could to toughen him up. You had a pretty tough father.
So what? You know, lots of people have tough fathers.
He beat you up. And
no, he didn't beat me up. He spanked me.
Spanked me with a wire hanger?
Yeah, a couple times.
But that's pretty traumatic stuff.
It was, but he was doing it to make me better.
And you think it made you better?
I think so.
At age 21, he began working for his father's outdoor advertising business. But shortly after, an event that both shaped and shattered Ted Turner. Your father's suicide, that would strike me as something that would be awfully difficult for anybody to get over.
Sure.
Were you out to prove something to him, even though he was gone?
He wanted me to be a big success, and all my life I've tried to be a big success. So his influence was huge.
That success is plastered all over the walls of his Atlanta office. CNN made Turner into a statesman of sorts, hobnobbing with world leaders. But he may be best remembered for the impolitic things he said, insulting Christianity, fellow billionaires, even the Italians.
Italians. Imagine the Italians at war. I mean, they'd rather be involved in crime and just making some wine and having a good time.
His utter inability to self-censor earned Turner the nickname the Mouth from the South. But to some, it was evidence of true mental instability. Turner admits he took the drug lithium for a while, but said it had no effect. But that didn't stop his rival, Rupert Murdoch, from questioning his sanity during their legendary war of words.
His newspapers were pretty brutal in attacking you.
All the time.
They called you crazy.
That's right.
Nuts, I think they said.
He had detectives following me around at times. At least
Really?
I think he did. I never had any proof of it.
You once said that Murdoch was the most dangerous man in the world. You still believe that?
No, I think George Bush is the most dangerous man in the world. I've made peace with Rupert. We had lunch together a few months ago. Now there's not anybody I don't like. But after this interview's over, I may not like you.
Yeah.
Vintage Ted Turner. As was his joy when he agreed to AOL's merger with Time Warner.
I did it with as much or more excitement and enthusiasm as I did on that night when I first made love some 42 years ago. It's that kind of...
He was now worth $10 billion, but shortly after the merger, Turner was pushed aside by Time Warner brass. Vice chairman of nothing, even though he was the company's largest individual stockholder. Then the internet bubble burst and AOL Time Warner's stock went into free fall.
You were losing nearly $10 million a day
No.
for 2.5 years.
$1 million a day.
$1 million a day for 2.5 years?
Wait a minute, that'd be 700 million. No, you're right, 10 million a day. I get thousands, millions, and billions mixed up, and
But when you're bleeding $10 million a day, at some point you just got to say, I'm getting out of this.
But my kids were all in the stock, most of my friends were, so I sat there loyally and went down the drain with everybody else.
To the tune of $7 billion. To Turner, it was apocalypse now. His marriage to Jane Fonda was breaking up. A grandchild was gravely ill, and he was jobless. His 5 children were worried that, like his father, Turner might take his own life.
He contemplated suicide, and I was really worried when Jane left him, and they took away his job the way they did. That was the lowest I'd ever seen him.
He was really depressed, and a lot of other things were happening in our family as well, so it was a really, really tough time for him. He barreled through it.
And he also got help. He got professional help.
He went to a shrink.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And he said he always left his shrink, and he cheered his shrink up. He said he would leave him laughing.
Turner admits he spent more time gallivanting around the globe than he did being a father.
I think he may be the most restless man I've ever met.
We never sat down for a meal for more than 15 minutes, I guarantee you.
He'd also give the monologue. The conversation was his through the whole dinner.
The operative word is monologue.
Yeah, he likes to talk at you.
So how was your day time to go?
Yeah, after a vacation with Dad, you need a vacation.
Recently, Turner says he has become a better father and feels his relationship with his children is his greatest achievement.
If his kids is his greatest achievement, what do you think is his biggest disappointment?
I've heard him say his failure of his marriages.
He's been married 3 times, most famously to actress Jane Fonda, a union that lasted 10 years.
You seemed really happy, you and Jane Fonda together.
We were, for a long time.
And what went wrong?
It's hard to tell. Obviously, it was a combination of things.
Do you wish that the marriage had managed to survive?
Well, it didn't. I mean, there's no point in sitting around and crying about spilt milk. Got to move on.
Moving on is Turner's mantra. It also put a hex on his marriage to Jane Fonda.
It's impossible to really be with Ted the way he needs someone to be with him and have any kind of life of your own.
He's perfectly aware of it. He said
Yes.
to me, he said, I hate being alone.
He's aware that it makes it hard for the person who's, trying to love him.
But what's interesting is the moment he's in one place for a couple of days, he's got to move on to somewhere else.
Yeah. When you're chased by demons, you have to keep moving.
Though they've been divorced for 8 years, they're in some way inseparable.
If Ted really needed me, I would be there in a blue minute.
Yeah, I think he misses you a lot.
I think he does, yeah. I'm not getting emotional because I wish I was still living with him, but he touches me deeply, deeply, the contradictions that make up Ted Turner.
Turner admits being a husband is not his strong suit.
You had a tough time at monogamy, correct?
It's a lot easier now.
Now that you're not married, you mean?
Well, at being 70 too.
But you still have a lot of girlfriends.
I still have some. I'm dating.
Turner now dates several women at once, and they all look remarkably alike. They take turns as traveling companions in his restless wandering. And he's as generous as ever with his philanthropy. He famously pledged $1 billion to the UN and has given another $500 million or so to causes he believes in. But lest you think Turner has completely withdrawn from business, welcome to Ted's Montana Grill.
Everything okay?
Home of the Bison Burger. Turner started the eco-friendly chain as a way of ensuring the survival of his favorite mammal, both on a bun and roaming the prairie.
So these are bison.
Yeah.
Don't step in the poop.
His herd of 50,000 roams on only a few of the 27 properties he owns across North and South America. He plans to leave it all to conservation after he's gone.
When our time's up, it's up.
And no matter how rich you are, doesn't matter.
That's right. All the money in the world won't buy you one more day.
So you might as well give it away.
Might as well.
Portrait of a man temporarily at peace, taking a break from his marathon race with life. Catch and release, just like those billions that slipped away.
Out here, I don't have to worry about the $7 billion I lost.
$7 billion, it'll make you stop and think.
You know, you can't cry over spilt milk, as I said before. You got to press on, my man. Aha! Another nice one.
It's interesting how many big high-tech companies were started by two friends, like Hewlett and Packard, or Google's Larry and Sergey. Microsoft was too. Bill Gates co-founded his company, one of the most important and successful in American history, with his high school buddy, Paul Allen. Today, Allen is known more for his mega yachts and palling around with Brad and Angelina than for his revolutionary ideas in the company's early years. But now, Paul Allen has written a memoir called Idea Man, out this week, in which he not only gives an account of those ideas, he draws a dark portrait of his fellow co-founder and lifelong friend. As Allen writes and tells us in one of the only in-depth interviews he's ever given, he was too angry and proud to tell Gates point blank, quote, "Some days working with you is like being in hell." You describe Bill Gates in very harsh terms. You describe him as being quite abusive. I mean, it's not a pretty picture.
And I felt like when I wrote it, I should just tell it like it happened in an unvarnished way, warts and all.
You know, here he is doing such great work. He's almost a saint now. And it seems like an odd time to write an unflattering portrait of him.
The timing had nothing to do with the many wonderful things that Bill has done. But the timing was because I wanted to see if I could do it and hopefully be alive to see it published.
No wonder he was concerned. When he started the book in 2009, he had stage 4 lymphoma. The book goes back to the beginning. This is a picture of Allen when he was 15 and met a boy at his private school in Seattle, 2 years his junior, named Bill Gates.
There's the machine room. You can see the machine room in there.
This video shows the two buddies revisiting an old computer lab where they used to feed their obsession with programming.
You lift me into one of those huge garbage bins.
Bill and I would actually dive in the dumpsters to try to find listings of the secret inner code of the operating system and try to figure out how it worked. That's how passionate we were.
They both became crack coders, but early on, Allen emerged as a creative dreamer, Gates a cold-eyed pragmatist. You write that when he was 13 years old, He told you one day we're going to start a company, run a company.
He was saying, well, imagine what it's like to run a Fortune 500 company. And I'm thinking, I have no idea. You know, my parents were librarians.
You kept bringing him ideas, and you write in the book, he was always popping my balloon.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. I mean, I would have, 10 ideas, and he would kind of pick them apart one by one.
One of Alan's ideas Gates didn't shoot down would lead to the personal computer revolution and launch Microsoft. It was 1974. He was a college dropout working in Boston, and one day he spotted a magazine announcing a new small computer called the Altair. He ran to show it to his friend Gates, then at Harvard.
I said, here, look at the magazine. You know, this is the computer we've been waiting for.
This is how the PC, the idea that we all have these computers, this is how it started.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think back then, nobody had personal computers. I mean, there were computers in universities and research labs and in corporations, but nobody had personal computers.
Alan's idea was to write software that would enable the Altair to work as well as those large computers.
And so we called up the company that made it and said, well, we can demonstrate this software for you very, very quickly. Are you interested? And they said, sure, if you can really show up and demonstrate it.
Did you have software?
No.
You had nothing.
We had nothing.
So they spent the next 8 weeks at Harvard feverishly writing code, but without an Altair to test on. Alan writes that because Gates looked like he was 13, they decided Alan should go alone to pitch their software. Sitting by an old original Altair, he showed me how he fed the computer a paper strip with their code punched into it and typed print 2 + 2.
And then I hit return, which is the same thing. And lo and behold, it printed 4. And a wave of relief surged over me because I almost couldn't believe it had worked the first time. So that night I call Bill up and I say, Bill, yeah, it's unbelievable, it worked. And we were just over the moon.
It was the beginning of the age of a computer in every home, on every desk. Almost overnight, people started buying these small computers, and their software was in high demand. In 1977, Gates was even interviewed on a TV show.
There's a lot of people who are forecasting that there'll be software stores just like there are record stores today, and that there'll be thousands and thousands of those. And I think I'd have to agree with that.
Alan writes that Gates had a rare gift for programming. He was also the shrewder businessman. From the beginning, he demanded a larger share of the company, 60%, and then more. But Alan says he was the one who pushed through the company's big early break, developing an operating system for IBM's first personal computer in 1980. Yet, as the company soared, Alan didn't want to give up his whole life to Microsoft the way Gates did.
Well, I've always had so many different interests.
But do you think he came to think that you weren't working as hard as he was, and it became a source of resentment with him?
Well, I think he was always pushing people to work as hard as they possibly could.
You included.
Maybe me more than everybody else.
You describe Bill in this period, and actually throughout, as tough, a taskmaster. You talk about his yelling, screaming.
There was a lot of yelling.
You guys never understood. You never understood the first thing about this.
A 1994 CBS News profile got a sample of Gates's management style, which Alan describes as browbeating and personal verbal attacks.
That's ridiculous. I'm not using this thing. No. Somebody's confused. Somebody's just not thinking. I mean, there's no way.
We'll figure it out.
You had to fight back intensely to stand your ground and make your position and your convictions expressed.
But he didn't like to back down. So these fights would go on, you said. They could go on for hours.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
We're just screaming at each other for hours?
And it's exhausting. It's exhausting, but that was Bill's style.
Alan was miserable and felt he was being marginalized. And then things got a lot worse. He got cancer. One night he passed by Gates's office and overheard him talking with Steve Ballmer, who'd been hired to help run the company. What were they saying?
They were basically talking about how they were planning to dilute my share down to almost nothing. And it was really a shocking and disheartening moment for me.
And you were sick.
Well, I think I was still probably in the middle of radiation therapy.
He burst in and interrupted them. He says they were trying to cut him out and rip him off.
And of course, Steve came over to my house later that night to apologize.
He did?
He did.
But Bill didn't come.
No, he sent Steve.
He sent Steve. It wasn't Steve, he sent Steve.
Well, Steve's the one who came.
Shortly after, Alan left, but he got to hold on to all his shares. It's hard to feel sorry for him. He was 30, cured of cancer, and owned nearly a third of Microsoft. So you built this building.
Yeah, this is...
After the company went public, Alan became one of the richest men on Earth, at one point worth an estimated $40 billion. Gates would spend another 2 decades running Microsoft, launching Word, Windows, and Explorer.
Thank you.
And once he retired, he devoted himself to eradicating global disease and improving education. Alan has spent his wealth on a hodgepodge of many interests. For instance, he plays electric guitar, so he has his own personal rock and roll band to jam with. And he bought Jimi Hendrix's Woodstock guitar for $750,000. He likes science fiction. He subsidizes an antenna farm listening for aliens. An avid reader, he showed us a Shakespeare folio he keeps at his estate. You became the owner of the Seahawks. He likes football. He bought an NFL team. He likes basketball even more. He also bought an NBA team. He's a movie buff, so he invested in DreamWorks, the Hollywood studio. He wants to travel, so he built himself a yacht longer than a football field, equipped with its own submarine. He has spent over $1 billion on philanthropy, including building an institute to study the brain. And like Gates, he's pledged to give most of his money away to charity. Now, he got married.
Right.
You never got married.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'm still optimistic. I still believe I'm going to meet somebody, and that's going to happen. But
you want to?
I want to have a family.
But he's often described as a recluse.
Each of them has about...
Something struck me when he showed us his collection of vintage warplanes. I get this Howard Hughesy feel with the planes, Hollywood. Do you think about that ever?
Well, I hope I don't end up in a cinema by myself watching I Station Zebra over and over again. I think I've got such a diverse set of interests: movies, aviation, technology,
Howard
sports
Hughes.
Teams. Well, I don't know if Howard was involved in sports teams, but...
Alan's diverse set of interests also led him to invest in over 100 business ventures. Most of them were poorly managed or ahead of their time, so they flopped. And he slid from being the 3rd richest man in the world to 57th. Were you just too early? Or was it that you really needed a Bill Gates and didn't have that other person to push it through?
Look, at the Microsoft days, you had some great ideas and some great execution between me and Bill and many other people. You know, in technology, most things fail. Most companies fail. But I had some whoppers.
Some of his whoppers, however, produced numerous patents. Last year, in a move that angered Silicon Valley, Alan sued several giant companies, accusing them of infringing on those old patents. Who are you suing?
Oh, it's a long list.
AOL, Apple, eBay, Facebook, Google, Netflix, Office Depot, Office Max, Staples, Yahoo, and YouTube.
Right.
How do you argue that you had something to do with Google? It just seems so outlandish or kind of wacky.
Look, Microsoft and Google, all these people have patents of their own. They all enforce patents. They all charge other companies for patents. And all I'm trying to do is get back the investment that I made to create these patents.
We kept hearing that what he's really trying to do is gain recognition as a tech visionary. But with his book, Idea Man, he's being branded a bitter billionaire. What's your reaction to people saying it's kind of a revenge book, a bitter book?
It's not about that. I just felt like it's an important piece of technology history, and I should tell it like it happened, and I hope people understand and respect that.
But for all the bad feelings Alan writes about with Gates, near the end of the book he reveals something that happened when he got cancer a second time in 2009.
And he came to see you, he comforted you when you were sick.
Right. Bill came, here to my house multiple times, and we had some great talks. And there's a bond there that can't be denied, and I think we both feel that.
Even after the book? I know he's read the book.
Right. No, I'm sure at some point we'll sit down and talk about the book, which we haven't done yet.
You'll have a screaming match.
Well, I don't know about screaming, but I'm sure it'll be a heated discussion.
Do you think there's any reason that you're going to have to apologize to him now?
I don't think so.
We asked Bill Gates for a comment, and while he declined, he has said that the founding of Microsoft was an equal partnership, and Paul deserves more credit than he's often given.
Think about it. Beyond your income taxes, how much money would you give to help the government? For one Wall Street titan, the answer is hundreds of millions of dollars. David Rubenstein is the all-American. At age 65, a self-made billionaire who's pledging a good part of his fortune to save America's history. When an idea strikes him, he just might write a check for, say, $15 or $20 million. Among his recipients, the Washington Monument, Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello, and just last week, the Iwo Jima Memorial. And he's buying up rare historical documents, preserving them for generations to come. This is inside the Washington Monument, the moment an earthquake struck Washington, D.C. in 2011. One of the nation's most treasured memorials now had to close. It would take a Superman to put it back together again, but in fact, it was Clark Kent in a suit and tie, armed with just a BlackBerry and a passion for American history.
It's a monument to our first president and to the Revolutionary War general.
How did he manage to pull it off? Not with muscles, but with money. Lots of money.
It's a shorter version of it.
Our Clark Kent is David Rubenstein. When he heard about the damage, he offered to pay the $15 million it would take to repair it.
Isn't that what government is supposed to do?
Well, the government doesn't have the resources it used to have. We have gigantic budget deficits and large debt. I think private citizens need to pitch in.
Co-chair of the Campaign for the National Mall, David Rubenstein.
Congress, not wanting to be shown up by a single patriotic American, ended up offering to split the bill. And the monument reopened to much fanfare last spring. He's so far spent over $50 million on rare historical documents like original copies of the Declaration of Independence and the Emancipation Proclamation, which now hangs in the Oval Office. And he's looking to spend millions more to restore national monuments like the Lincoln Memorial and the homes of the Founding Fathers.
In honor of George Washington, we built the Washington Monument.
We met up with him at Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, where he gave us a tour and an impromptu history lesson which led inevitably to the founder's teeth, or absence thereof.
George Washington only had one tooth, and he used that one tooth to kind of hold in his dentures. And they were called wooden teeth, but not because they were wood. They were animal teeth. But he had a doctor in New York who's named Dr. Greenwood, and it was shortened to wooden teeth. What they do is they take animal teeth, put them together in a denture, but you need something to hook it onto. So he had his one tooth, and that's why you'll never see a picture of him with his mouth open, because it didn't look good.
You're somewhat of a George Washington scholar.
Well, I wouldn't say a scholar, but I'd say a fan.
Why did you choose him?
As it was said at his funeral, he was first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen.
Unlike most multi-billionaires, Rubenstein doesn't have a foundation and personally oversees each gift from his modest Washington office. How do you make the judgment
Because you don't have a staff, correct?
I don't have a staff, but I generally look at things where my money will make a difference. And in patriotic philanthropy, I think I can do some things because not as many people are doing things in medical research or other kinds of areas like that.
But you seem to make these decisions spur of the moment.
Sometimes the best decisions of life are on the spur of the moment. So I generally try to do what I think is right, and sometimes I've made mistakes.
Care to talk about your mistakes?
It would take more than 60 minutes.
Rubenstein's foray into patriotic philanthropy began on a whim when, on a business trip to New York, he heard the last privately held copy of the 800-year-old British Magna Carta would be auctioned off the next day and would most likely leave the country. Rubenstein sent his wallet into action.
The head auctioneer came in and said, "You just bought the Magna Carta. Who are you? We don't know who you are." And I explained, and they said, "Okay, you can be yours if you have the money. You do have the money for this." I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay, you can leave the side door, nobody ever know, or there's 100 reporters who want to know who bought it." And I said, "I will go out and talk to them to tell them that I'm giving it to the country, in effect, as a down payment on my obligation to give back to the country."
What are the symbols on the seal?
Beyond the $21 million purchase price, Rubenstein built a multi-million-dollar center at the National Archives to showcase the document that served as the inspiration not only for our Bill of Rights, but for all Western democracies.
And if you're better informed about American history, you can be a better citizen.
His friend Warren Buffett says Rubenstein's approach is unique.
He may wake up in the morning without knowing what that philanthropic act is going to be by sundown, but something will spark his interest, and when it does, he can move.
Jonathan Jarvis is director of the National Park Service. He oversees the nation's memorials.
Have you ever had any offers of somebody who's come forth with his attitude and his dough?
Not really. I think David is somewhat unique and is sort of occupying this space of patriotic philanthropy at the moment.
What else has he offered to pay for it?
Well, the next big project he did after the Washington Monument was the Robert E. Lee Memorial, which sits at Arlington Cemetery. He gave us $12.3 million to do a full restoration. And then he has also offered, just recently, $5 million to restore the Marine Corps War Memorial, the Iwo Jima. David recognized that this is an opportunity to give back to the country and also to recognize the Marine Corps, where his father served.
The people in the House are wondering, who are these crazy people who are out here? Probably wonder whether I'm about to be indicted for something.
We traveled with Rubenstein and his mother Betty to the home he grew up in working-class Baltimore. His father was a mail sorter at the post office.
When I was growing up here, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought one thing I didn't want to do was what you wanted me to do.
My dream from a small child that you become a dentist.
Rubenstein disappointed his mother and instead went to law school. Then, at age 27, he landed a job in the White House, an advisor to President Carter.
How would you rate yourself as a public servant?
I enjoyed it very much. I'm not sure the country enjoyed what I did for the country. I like to say that there was a rumor that I was going to be promoted in the second term, and that's why President Carter lost. And since I have left the White House, I can tell you honestly, nobody's ever invited me back.
When he was booted from the White House along with Jimmy Carter in 1980, Rubenstein tried lawyering, but says he was terrible at it. So in 1987, he and two partners decided to start one of the first D.C.-based investment firms, which they named after a New York hotel.
What made you decide to call the company Carlyle?
Carlyle sounded kind of British, and it sounded kind of maybe not aristocratic, but sounded like you've been around for a while when we really hadn't been around. We were new.
It's now a global giant, over $200 billion in assets. For years, the firm had a reputation as politically connected and secretive. Carlyle's success made Rubenstein a fortune. He says his wife Alice and 3 kids support his decision to give most of it away.
In the end, it's not clear that if you give a child $500 million, he or she will win a Nobel Prize for doing something. And I think if you give somebody too much money, it can force them not to work as hard and be as productive.
A cardinal sin in Rubenstein's eyes. And in 2010, he was one of the first to sign on to the Giving Pledge with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett,
The guy who was the map maker was from Connecticut. So
promising to give away at least half of his billions to worthy causes.
I think many of the members of the Giving Society, and certainly including David, would like to have their last check bounce. I mean, that's their goal. It's a little hard to time things perfectly so that happens, but there's no Forbes 400 in the graveyard.
Like Warren Buffett, Rubenstein isn't flashy. He drives a 20-year-old car. He doesn't drink or smoke, but he's allowed himself one super luxury, a $65 million plane he uses to fly around the world, an average of 200 days a year. He is a man in motion, appearing on TV,
it's a global investment world that we're dealing with.
boosting his firm,
And I started at the first buyout firm in Washington, D.C.
sitting on 26 non-for-profit boards,
How many people have never been here before?
and taking his stand-up comedy routine on the road.
I became the Deputy Domestic Policy Advisor to the President of the United States, a job I obviously wasn't qualified for, but Carter wasn't qualified either, I thought, so.
When you became wealthy enough to sort of sit back, you remained a workaholic.
It's not work for me. I am not under any pressure or stress when I'm doing this. When I'm trying to relax, if I ever do that, that's when I'm under stress. And I think I'm more likely to have a heart attack when I'm relaxing than when I'm under working.
Takes a lot of brains to do what we do. Looking for a way to make some dough for you. Energy.
Work now including learning how to rap after Carlyle doubled its money in an investment in the headphone company Beats by Dre.
We're global, we're mobile, we're aiming to please. Only goal of mine, serve LPs.
I did meet Dr. Dre when we were first doing the deal, and we did a takeoff on that for our holiday video. Haven't done anything like this really since my bar mitzvah. And when I did it, it was supposed to take 5 minutes, and it took about 4 hours. And they had a young rap coach for me to explain how to do this, and he said, Mr. Rubenstein, you are the whitest man I've ever met in my life.
How were the legs after going up the stairs?
I
Excellent.
didn't need a defibrillator. I didn't have to go to the hospital. I made it.
Rubenstein may use self-deprecation as a form of bragging, and if you don't get the message, he puts his name on his good works. $20 million here, $75 million there, soon adds up to real money. He even joked he put his initials at the top of the Washington Monument.
I took my pen out and I put my initials at the very top of the Washington Monument. So if you ever get there, you'll see my initials.
How important is the recognition? Because you put your name on most of the things you support. Is that, I think, what, to use a Yiddish word, chutzpah?
Maybe I have a character flaw and I haven't done it as anonymously because I'm trying to say to people, I came from very modest circumstances and look what I was able to do. You can do the same thing.
And while the vast majority of his wealth goes to inanimate objects, Rubenstein took care of D.C.'s favorite residents, Mama Bear Mei Xiang, Papa Bear Tian Tian, and Baby Bear Bao Bao when the National Zoo ran out of money.
I said, okay, I'll put up the money to keep them here because the Chinese rent pandas. You pay $1 million a year, more or less, and you get 2 pandas. And the money goes for panda conservation.
Sweet potatoes, right?
Pandas are the biggest attraction at the zoo, and when the government had its shutdown, people weren't calling in to say they weren't getting their Social Security checks or Congress wasn't moving forward with anything. They were saying the panda cam was shut down.
Richard Nixon first brought the pandas to the U.S. after his historic trip to China in 1972. Panda diplomacy may have worked, but panda love life is another matter.
You've compared the relationship between male and female pandas with the U.S. Congress.
Members of Congress know what they're supposed to do, but they don't know how to do it. The pandas know what they're supposed to do, but they fumble. They come here with the best of intentions, but sometimes things don't work out the way that they're supposed to.
So it's bye-bye, bow-bow, and thank you, Mr. Rubenstein.
So I don't think anything I've said has impressed Bao Bao.
No.
In this era of belt-tightening, it's kind of refreshing to take a look at people whose happiest pastime is to give money away. Such a man is 77-year-old Eli Broad, a self-made billionaire, art collector, and for the past 10 years, one of the most consistently generous philanthropists in America. supporting education reform, medical research, and the arts, who also wants to transform that sprawling monster of a city, Los Angeles, into a cultural capital. Eli Broad thinks big, but his critics say he can act very small, that he may give billions away, but he tries to micromanage almost every dollar he gives. Eli Broad doesn't really care what they say. All he wants to do is die poor. Well, relatively poor.
I believe in two things. One, Andrew Carnegie said, "He who dies with wealth dies in shame." And someone said, "He who gives while he lives also knows where it goes."
There's no one quite so civic-minded in America. Eli Broad and his wife Edie have become paparazzi pets because of the money they lavish on Los Angeles. So far, more than $500 million.
Eli, over here to the right.
Who says money can't buy you love?
And Eli and your lovely wife, right here, please.
Behold his footprint on Los Angeles. He's a driving force behind 16 major public institutions. In the center of downtown, a cultural corridor anchored by the magnificent Disney Hall, home of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Next to it, the home of the Los Angeles Opera, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the High School for the Performing Arts, and the School of Music. In Greater Los Angeles, 3 scientific research centers, a theater, an art center, and another contemporary art museum. He puts his name on almost all of them. You've said that your sense of being a wealthy man actually increased the more you gave money away.
I think it's true. I don't feel I'm here to just maintain a status quo. I'm here to make things better or different.
And you want the world to know about it by putting your name on all the things you do support.
I don't keep it a secret, that's for sure.
Broad took us to Grand Avenue. This is quite a vista, which he plans to transform into a vibrant city center rivaling New York's Museum Mile. Disney Hall, designed by Frank Gehry, almost did not get built. Broad rescued the project by putting up his own money and putting the squeeze on fellow plutocrats.
It's really become the symbol of our city.
And then there's his own museum, the Broad. This is a rendering. It's still a parking lot, but it will eventually hold his $1.6 billion art collection. How much is this going to cost? Something approaching $1 billion?
More.
More?
More.
We were interrupted by an Angelino driving by.
Eli, buy the Dodgers! Buy the Dodgers!
Eli, buy the Dodgers. You could be the George Steinbrenner of Los Angeles.
No. I've got enough on my plate.
Broad runs his philanthropic foundation like a for-profit business, not a charity. Charity, he says, is just writing checks. He practices what he calls venture philanthropy.
We don't give it away, we invest it, and we want a return. Remember, I started work as a CPA, so that gave me fiscal discipline in everything I did in business, and I guess some of it carries over to philanthropy.
Eli Broad says, I want results, and if you're not going to show me results, I'm not going to give you the money. And incidentally, after 1 year, if you don't show me results, I'm going to stop funding you.
New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, no mean philanthropist himself, admires Broad's uncuddly approach and the $32 million he's given to New York schools.
Eli Broad sets the standard. I think it's really being a role model for others. And they look at Eli, and because of him, they get the ideas, I'm going to be innovative and be philanthropic and do some other things. The leverage of Eli Broad is really quite amazing.
Amazing to the extent of almost $500 million he's poured into improving public education. He spends even more on medical research. 8 years ago, he teamed up with Harvard and MIT to create, you guessed it, the Broad Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Broad is the world's leading genomic medicine institute. All discoveries are free, available to anyone. Let me be rude and ask, how much have you put into this institute?
$600 million total.
Broad grew up in Detroit, the only child of immigrant shopkeepers. At 21, he married Edie Lawson.
We borrowed $25,000 from our parents.
And that $25,000 led ultimately to
a lot of money.
In 1957, Broad and a partner launched a no-frills home building business. He was a millionaire by 27. He bought Sun Life Insurance in 1971 and sold it in 1999 for $18 billion. And that's when he and Edie decided to give most of it away. You're giving 75% of your wealth away.
Maybe more by the time it's over.
Or maybe more. You have 2 children.
Yes.
What about them?
They're well taken care of. They're different than their dad.
Different how?
They don't have, frankly, the ambition to build a great business that I had.
You've been open about admitting that you were not a great father.
Look, when I started, it was 24/7, as they say. And I didn't spend enough time with the kids when they were growing up. I admit that.
Is that something you regret now?
I do to some degree. We all go back and would do things over differently in our lives.
Today, Broad balances his life with his passion for contemporary art, like this Richard Serra sculpture.
Civilizations are not remembered by their business people or bankers or lawyers. They're remembered by the arts.
He's collected over 2,000 works of art. Unlike most collectors, almost all of Broad's art is available for loan to museums. He loaned these pieces to the LA County Museum of Art and threw in a $50 million building to house them. One of his favorite artists is the irrepressible Jeff Koons. And here, a veritable cornucopia of Koonsian genius. All, of course, painted and sculpted by hired craftsmen. Koons is nothing if not worshipful of Eli Broad.
You know, Morley and Eli, I just have to say, standing here, what a fantastic location. I mean, look at the natural light that's coming in on these works. It's just a tremendous gallery.
And the balloon dog? What does it do to you? Do you get some kind of emotional kick?
I do. It makes me smile, makes me feel good. It makes me proud. It especially makes me proud when I see young people and others looking at the work. And it introduces them to art in a way that no other work really does.
And a piece that, quite honestly, mystifies me, Michael Jackson and a chimp, is it?
Michael Jackson Bubbles. When I made this series, the Banality series,
of banality?
Of images. I was trying to communicate to people that whatever you respond to, it's perfect.
If you find Koons' art speak incomprehensible, well, just wait.
These are to make references to be in the womb a little bit, before birth and prior to any kind of concept of death.
Do you totally get what he's talking about?
Not to the extent that Jeff does, but I do listen, understand, and learn from artists, especially Jeff.
But not all artists are as respectful as Jeff Koons. Take architect Frank Gehry.
Eli's a control freak. I worked on a house for him. I didn't want to do it.
Why didn't you want to do it?
I just told him I didn't like him. He said, "You'll learn to like me."
Broad fired Gehry, then built the house anyway, using Gary's drawings.
After 2 years and 7 different models, I was impatient. I think he wanted to spend another year or 2 designing it. And I said, Frank, a work of art is never finished, it's only abandoned.
They worked together again 3 years later to build Disney Hall. And once again, Broad fired Gehry. But he had to eat humble pie when the Disney family insisted that he hire Gehry back.
We did it, we built it. We weren't friends.
You made your peace with him at the same time
I won't do a project for him, that's true.
Eli's middle name is Strings Attached. Eli Strings Attached Broad.
Christopher Knight, the art critic for the Los Angeles Times, has been Broad watching for years.
He's a first-generation, male, self-made gazillionaire. And people in that category typically believe, and with good evidence, that they know how to make something a success. And that can be a problem.
With science, Broad leaves the details to the experts. But when he dangles his money and his art in front of most major museums in LA, he sees himself as the expert. And if they don't play, he won't pay.
Well, I'm a perfectionist. And on things I know something about, I do get involved.
We've talked to a number of people who say that you can turn into a bully.
I don't think I'm a bully, but on the other hand, I'm not a potted plant either.
No, I'm sure you're not a potted plant, but these people who say some pretty unkind things about you will not talk publicly. They clearly are scared of you.
I don't know why they're scared of me.
Well, because you're a rich guy and therefore a powerful guy, and you've got a temper.
I've got strong views on things.
But even your good friend Frank Gehry says Eli can be a real pain in the ass.
I can understand why Frank could say that, because I am impatient, and patience has its limits.
Number one, it's his money, and you don't have to take it, so I'm sympathetic with that. Eli is not a micromanager as much as he has ideas on how you can make society better, and he's devoting his own money to doing it. Kind of hard to argue with that he doesn't have the right to do it, and you don't have to play the game if you don't want to.
When you've got one 800-pound gorilla in the room, you're scared to death of the guy. Everybody does want something from Eli, and since he is the biggest game in town, nobody wants to alienate him.
I just appreciate you all so much.
Just watch this crowd at the recent gala for the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art, which Broad bailed out 2 years ago for $30 million. It was a scrum of culture vultures, fashion victims, and art victims, dealers and collectors, a night when skinniness was next only to godliness, when philanthropy and social climbing, self-aggrandizement and greed dissolved into one gigantic air kiss, all under the benevolent eye of that feared and admired dictator, Eli Broad. Beyond the altruistic part of it, ego plays a part in this?
Oh, absolutely.
A desire to be loved?
A desire to be respected. I'm not doing these things to become the most popular person in the city. I want to be the most respected person.
We left him on the roof of his art foundation, this fully contented man, this master of all he surveys. What's this at the very end here? I know what this is.
What is it?
It's Bigfoot.
It is Bigfoot.
And who is the biggest foot in Los Angeles right now?
I don't know. I don't think so.